welcome for the first time, or welcome back to the Electric Vibe podcast, the new chapter. My name is Kurt Hoffman. I'm your co host, and along with my smooth voiced brother from another mother, Mr. JD Silva. JD, we have a special announcement, I believe.
We sure do, Kurt. I want to say that today we're going to be celebrating the 40th anniversary of the last show of the Purple Rain Tour by Prince and the Revolution. That show, held at the Orange Bowl, which was affectionately redubbed the Purple Bowl that day in Miami, was the final show of the 6-month long Purple Rain Tour. Selling over 1.7 million tickets, that tour was a juggernaut for 1984 and 1985. Well, today we're joined by somebody who was on that tour in its entirety. And that someone just happens to be executive protector, businessman, and the new co-host of the Electric Vibe podcast, Mr. Harlan Hucky Austin. Hucky, welcome and congratulations on joining the Electric Vibe podcast.
Man, this is great. I'm so glad to be here. Super excited. Super excited to be working with you gentlemen.
As are we.
Hucky, you have added some special sauce, to say the least. If folks have been looking at our social media posts the last couple of days, you turned it out.
Well, hey, this is just a little snippet of what's to come.
Oh, and I can't wait to get into today's topic. It's hard to believe it's been 40 years, but just to give us a little teaser, I had that show queued up. If you'll give me just a moment.
Happy Easter, Florida.
Oh, you're taking me back, Kurt.
I know. All right, that's a little teaser for the audio there. So
That's awesome.
Hucky, 40 years ago. Now, you've told us some great stories. You have great memories from back in the day, but taking us back to that very day and that week where you guys had been all over. What was the whole scenario like going to Miami?
Well, first of all, every time you say 40 years, I get cringe. I mean, it's like, wow, 40 years. It's crazy. It just seems like it was just yesterday. And here we are 40 years later. Kurt, what I remember is, the Miami show was obviously the last date. And so there was a lot of excitement. Anytime we played large stadiums like that, I think we only did a couple on the Purple Rain tour, and I'm sure Miami was the only outdoor large venue that we did. But what I remember is that we were so happy to get to Florida because 1985 was a brutal winter, and the last dates were in Southern Florida, and so we were all excited. It was kind of some mixed emotions because the tour was coming to an end. And when you work with some individuals as long as all of us work together, it's mixed emotions there. We got to grow close, met a lot of new friends, and, you were sad that it was going to be over. Imagine like you're graduating from high school. You guys remember that feeling? Short year, and it's just like, oh, we're all leaving. We're all going our own way. That's kind of how we felt.
Hucky, can you talk about the vibe of that last show relative to, the other shows and what kind of the mood was for the entire camp?
Yeah, Jay. So first of all, anytime you played a large stadium like that, the electricity that was in the air. I mean, it's not to say that didn't happen in arenas. It certainly did. But I feel like there was about 55, 60,000 people there. So there was a lot more energy than what you would have in a normal arena. And so it was a lot of excitement. And like I said earlier, it was a bag of mixed feelings. We were happy in one sense that this long tour was going to be over. But then, you started thinking about, and I know I felt this way, well, what am I going to do now? Because there was no certainty that I would have a job after the tour. I mean,
Really?
I had worked with Prince before, we went on the road, but, things were Things were always changing, so you never knew.
Mm. Well, staying at the Omni Hotel, what can you tell us about the background, environment, and trying to keep the peace in this major city for this major gig? What was that whole situation like, Hucky?
Yeah, it's always amazing to me how you guys get these little nuggets and find out things. So once again, you've done your homework. Awesome. Um, yeah, I remember the hotel was like it feels like it was right on the ocean there. I have several pictures, and I think we're going to be sharing those a little bit later. But yeah, it was right on the ocean, and once
Mm.
again, I can't tell you guys how great it felt to be in warm weather. I remember the weather was really nice while we were down there, not only in Miami, but I think our first Florida date was in Tallahassee, and then we
Mm.
did Lakeland, Florida.
Mhm.
And I'm a sunshine junkie. You guys have probably seen me mention that quite a few times on different posts on
True.
Facebook. So
Indeed.
anytime I get that sunshine, man, it makes me feel so great. So it felt good. As far as our security routine, we had kind of, become old hat, even though you never can totally relax because you're always, preparing for, any type of situation. But I remember, checking in the hotel, meeting with the security director, going up to Prince's room to make sure that he had everything that he always requested for his room. And then, one of the things that we would always do is we would run routes from his room down to the carport or the garage or wherever the vehicles would be coming in. Obviously, we didn't come to the front lobby or anything like that. We usually would go through a service elevator and through the kitchen, through a lot of back hallways. But that's what I remember. But I had a great view. And I remember looking out my window and being able to see palm trees,
Mhm.
blue water. Yeah, that was
Mhm.
really nice.
You know,
Hucky, was
Hucky,
that your first? Oh, sorry, Jay. I was just going to ask, was that this tour? Was that your first time ever going to Florida?
Yeah, yeah, for
Okay.
sure. I had a conversation with an individual not too long ago. We were just talking about, I remember when I was younger, one of the things that I always wanted to do was travel. And here I had this amazing opportunity to go all over the world. And one of the things that I was thinking about as we were getting ready for the show, I was only 21, so just, a couple of years removed after high school. And here I was, 21-year-old young man traveling all over the world. So a lot of times, Kurt and Jay, a lot of these cities that we went to, it was my very first time being there. And
Mm.
Florida, that was my first time.
so Hucky, coming to the end of this tour, 6 months, the shows were high energy. Obviously, protecting Prince, I'm sure, was extremely detailed, extremely probably even a little bit more difficult with the fanfare and the craze. How was Prince's mood as he came to the end of this tour?
Yeah, we all sensed that, he was ready to move on. Um, we were just obligated to finish up this tour, but, Princess, he was always like 20 steps ahead of everybody else, and he was already working on his next projects. I remember, I think it was New Year's Day, we were in Dallas. We'll have to fact check that, but I feel like it was New Year's Day, and a small group of us had an opportunity to hear Around the World in a Day in his suite. And
Mm.
he had already had the album done. And so, for him, I'm sure he was bored. I mean, think about this playing that same, set night after night after night after night. But to his credit, I mean, he always came with energy. He always was so professional and he cared so much about his fans. So he gave it his all. But, I know he was ready to move on to the next chapter.
So with that, and talking about his boredom and wanting to play new stuff, I know towards the end of this tour, either in the sound check or in on stage towards the end, he was playing not only songs from around the world in a day, not on all shows, but he was also playing stuff from the first Family album that hadn't even come out yet. So you had, he was doing like in sound checks. I think we were looking at Mutiny and High Fashion. One of my favorite B-sides, which he occasionally played in shows, 17 Days. Can you talk about watching him do these sound checks, which often we listen to them. I like the sound check sometimes better than the show itself. And for that reason, we're the novelty of hearing these songs. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Kurt, it's interesting that you say that. And I always share with fans or anyone that's ever seen Prince play in concert. Certainly one of the greatest musicians ever, and the shows were just totally amazing. But what I say is that if you think the shows were amazing, Soundcheck was a whole nother level. I mean, it was, imagine being in a venue with Prince and the intimacy that offered, and just to see him be so creative. And not only just staff, but even the band. They never knew what to expect. So I tell you, the sound checks they were amazing. And I feel so privileged and blessed to not only, like I said, seen him hundreds and hundreds of times perform, but the sound checks, that was where the real magic was. And so, to hear him just do different things every day, it was just like, wow. And it was really a challenge because once again, remember, my job is I'm supposed to be focused there on his protection. And so occasionally, I would get caught up. I would be a fan and like, wow, I can't believe he's doing this. So this is amazing. So yeah.
Hucky, can you talk about some of the differences in protecting Prince and security between playing some of the smaller venues, the 10,000 seat arenas, 20,000 seat arenas, all of a sudden now to playing in front of 60,000 people?
Well, I mean, you can imagine, number one is just the mass, sheer amount of just people. I mean, if you're playing an arena club and there's 600 or 700 people in the club, that's very different from playing at a stadium that's 60 to 70,000. And so just the amount of people is always an issue too. But you have to have relationships with other individuals. I mean, our security team was small. I mean, there was only, at any given time, 4 to 6 of us. And so obviously, if you're playing at a stadium that's that large, you're going to need help. And you're going to have good relationships with people. So we had to have great relationships with the house security because those are the people that really do all the work. I mean, we're close to the band, we're close to the principal, Prince, but without having law enforcement, without having the house security do their job, we could never be successful. It's really the same thing, Jay and Kurt, with the Secret Service. I mean, the work that they do with protecting the president, they really count on law enforcement to help them out. And that was the same thing with us. No one has the resources, well, unless you're the president, but most people don't have those type of resources, without having partnerships with other individuals.
Yeah. With the recent discovery, there's a YouTube channel out there that has recently uploaded, like it sounds like soundboard uh, level quality recordings of not only the last show that you worked on, but also the sound check. Have you had a chance to listen to those and reflect on that at all? The quality of it? It's
Not
quite
so
amazing.
much. Somebody did send the sound check of this show to me, and I had an opportunity just to listen to it a little bit. I'm always amazed at how individuals are able to come across stuff. Like just last week, I seen on Facebook somebody had found his passport that he had during the time that I was with him. And I know that it was his original passport because I carried it. And so when I hear things like that, I'm like, wow, how did they get that? How did they find that? So yeah, but I guess, Kurt, to answer your question, I don't always get an opportunity to watch everything on YouTube. You'll be chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole, right? Because every day there's new stuff that's coming out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hucky, was there anything different in Prince's performance that night, it being the last show? Anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I feel like seeing that he knew it was the last show, he wanted to go out with a bang. So here's the thing that I need to make sure that I let, the fans know. It's like every night, okay? Every night this guy brought his A game.
Mm.
He never, never, ever shortchanged his fans. His fans meant so much to him. And I remember I think it was New Orleans, he had got really sick. And for the first time on tour, they were talking about canceling the show. And he's like, no, we're not going to do that. And he went out on stage and he poured his heart and soul, gave everything he had, and the show were great. And so Jay and Kurt, even though it was the end of the tour and all of us were tired, I'm sure Pete was tired as well. He gave it everything like he always did.
Mm. Did you all in the band and the crew celebrate afterwards? Was there a special, like, I don't know, people popping champagne and that kind of thing?
Now I don't recall that, because he just wasn't that type of guy.
Yeah.
I could hear him saying, it's like, so what did we only did what we were supposed to do. He went out, he performed for his fans. That was his job. And so I feel like he would never, in my time anyway, it's like, okay, that's it. Let's go ahead and celebrate. This is what he loved to do. This was his job. And he gave everything he had.
Hucky, can you talk about your own feelings when the tour was ending? I know we touched on it a little bit, but is there a sense of relief? You're going to be going back home. You're going to be seeing your family again. What emotions are you going through during that
Right.
last show?
Yeah. And like I said earlier, it was mixed for me because the tour was grueling. That's a long time to be away from home, especially for your first time.
Mhm.
Remember, I was just a young man, and so this was my first time on being away from home that long. But then there was some uncertainty too because I assumed that maybe I would have a job. I didn't know that for sure. I was ready to get home and see my family. So like I said, it was some mixed feelings there.
Mm. So I do have to want to backtrack just a little bit and talk about two things regarding the show. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I mean, he even says it in the very beginning that it just happened to be for many people Easter Sunday. Was there any pushback by the media, religious organizations, or anything like that that you can recall?
Yeah, I remember there was a buzz. You got to remember this is well before social media, so I can only
Yeah.
imagine what it would have been like today. But there were people that were not happy, and then at that time, there were individuals. What was Al Gore's wife's name? You guys remember? Was it Tipper?
Tipper. You
Mhm.
got it.
I know that she had Prince on her radar as an individual that young people shouldn't be listening to his music. So we had that whole vibe going around, and then it was Easter, and I remember hearing Prince's managers talk about, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. No one knew what to expect, but there were a lot of people that were unhappy. Not the fans, though. I remember, they were happy, they were thrilled. As a matter of fact, I was just looking at a comment on my Facebook page, and someone said it was the best Easter they ever had. I don't know about that, but that was the feeling. There were a lot of people that were really happy to see him.
And then there's one other thing, the weather. I looking at notes, and I have to shout out Dwayne Tudall's book, the second book about the tour, and very early in the book, that apparently that the ground that the stage was set on was kind of sinking a little bit. Do you remember anything regarding that? Because they said that the stage kind of was uh, kind of tilting on one side because the ground was sinking because it had rained a couple days prior to you guys
Hmm.
setting
No,
up camp.
I
Is
don't
that
remember that. As a matter of fact, so
okay?
we received these dailies that they would pass out, and they basically would let us know what the weather was going to be like every day. And what I recall is that mid 70s and sunny all week long. So I
Okay.
don't know. I guess I can't speak to that, Kurt.
Okay.
But Dwayne, like you said, he's a wonderful resource, and he's got some really good. I've enjoyed his books because it really helps me, to kind of recall a lot of things.
Yeah.
Said a lot of the stuff 40 years ago, and so I need some help. I need some help sometimes.
Um,
You know what, Hucky?
yeah.
What is the camaraderie between the security staff, between the bodyguards, the protectors? As the tour goes on and things start to gel, can you talk about maybe some nuances that you saw, changes that you saw from when the tour began to when the tour ended between yourself and who was protecting Sheila and some of the other fellows that you were working with?
Yeah, it's usually when you are in charge of protecting individuals, there's a bond. There's a bond that you share because your job is to protect someone at all cost, and so it's kind of a brotherhood. And not only people that were working with Prince on the tour, but I belong to a lot of organizations of different protectors, and there's that common theme. I don't know. You got to be wired differently to be willing to put yourself in front of somebody else for their needs and put their needs in front of your own. And not a lot of people can do that. It's the same thing. I have a friend that's a firefighter. I was like, you got to be wired differently to want to go into a burning house to save people. And so, it's the same thing with protection specialists. And so when we had a close relationship with Jay, not only with the security staff, but with everybody who work with P. And it's like, even today, regardless of what era, I'll talk to people that were working with P during the NPG era or with, later on, at the end. And we all have, some common things that we share together. So it's kind of like a very unique brotherhood.
Absolutely. That just, I mean, you're always going to be tied at the hip, especially with the crew that you worked on. And I've referred this before. That whole Purple Rain tour was like a mission going to the moon, and you all were mission control, and they were the astronauts launching this ship every single night, 90 some dates. And just the was there any so there are a couple things that we do need to discuss because your mentor, and we've talked about this before, Chick Huntsberry,
Yeah.
him leaving halfway through the tour and his departure from the tour, what kind of personal impact did that have upon you?
Yeah. And so, I mean, it had not only a huge impact on me and Gilbert and some of the other security staff, but also just everyone, that was a part of that inner circle. I mean, Chick, certainly for me, he's very special. He brought me on. I mean, if it wasn't for him and Mark Brown, then I don't think I would have been,
Mm.
working with Prince. And so for someone that was like my second dad, that taught me pretty much everything that I had known about security up until that time, to see him gone, that put a void in my life. And so,
Mm.
and I didn't really quite understand until many years later why Chick had left. I felt like he abandoned me and Gilbert, only to be in that same space several years later and to really
Mhm.
understand what he was going through. I mean, what it's like to
Mm.
be constantly on the road away from your family.
Mhm.
That's something that a lot of people don't see. And it's not just security, but anyone that works for somebody on that level, the sacrifices that you make. And your family is usually the one that takes the brunt of that.
Sure.
I think it was Tom Gurneau, one of Prince's sound people, but maybe it wasn't Tom. I can't remember, but it was one of the sound people that just talked about, they had to really figure out a way to change their job around because they were on call 24/7. And guys,
Mhm.
a couple things to keep in mind. This is well before cell phones. This
Mhm.
is well before social media, anything like that. So You were really a prisoner. I remember telling an individual years ago, I had went to Paris 4 times before I finally had an opportunity to go out and see the Eiffel Tower. And the reason for that was is I had to just wait in my room because, if P was ready to go do something, we had to be close by. And so, yeah. So anyway, getting back to G, it was an empty void. This is the guy who brought me in. This was the man that I looked up to. He was my mentor. He helped us navigate some really challenging things, and all of a sudden he's gone.
So, Hucky, who stepped up to? I'm sorry, Jay. Just to follow up with that. So when Chick leaves, who steps up as the head of security at that point?
Well, management brought in some outsiders.
Oh,
and didn't go so well. We'll leave it at that. And eventually, P intervened and said, no, Hucky and Gilbert will be running my security.
And Hucky, how did you find out that Chick was leaving? Did he tell you himself?
No, he was gone. It's
okay.
Where's Chick? And this is larger than life individual. It's like, you miss his presence. And he was just gone, And now that I look back, I shouldn't have been surprised. He missed his family. He missed his wife.
Sure.
He was constantly with Prince, and he was older too. And like I said, I wouldn't know what that felt like until years later. But imagine being in your 40s, traveling like that, on the go, constant. That a young person couldn't keep up with that type of pace.
Right.
I just imagine doing it now. How much back cream?
We're gonna get Alan Leeds on the show, and he can tell you what that's like. Cause Alan, for years after he left Prince, he still was out on the road. I think he worked with D'Angelo. He did some stuff with Chris Rock.
Yeah.
And Alan was well into his 50s doing that. And so anybody that's in the rock and roll business that's out there in their 50s and 60s that's still doing it, I take my hat off to you because you're a special individual. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of dedication.
Absolutely. You mentioned a guy like Alan Leeds. He's coming from working in James Brown's universe before even entering Prince's. So,
right. Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
so Alan, I don't know if you asked me this earlier, Jay, or not, but so Purple Rain was my Gilbert and my first tour. And so all these guys, that had done multiple tours and been on the road for years, they would give me and Gilbert all kinds of, hard times about stuff like these young, wet behind the ear kids come out on their first tour and it's the biggest tour ever. And, to put things in perspective, they were right because I'm like, oh, this is what every tour is like. Every tour is going to have 20, semi trucks that are going to load in and load out and 12 tour buses. And, I remember Alan always saying this wasn't a tour. This was a traveling company on the road.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was, it was our first show and it was a monster. It was huge, And
it was big business doing big business.
Yeah. Even though I did 5 more tours, nothing was on that size.
Sure.
Not on that scope.
Hucky, having said that, I'm just going to take a step back for a minute to something we talked about before. With Prince being so unpredictable, and I actually happened to see him be unpredictable one night at the Hartford, Connecticut show, where after the house lights were up, and this is March of '85, so the tour's coming to a close, and the house lights are up and people are streaming out, and Prince comes back on stage with The Revolution, and he does in about another 40 minutes. He did America, he did When the Saints Go Marching In, he probably did a couple of B-sides, and I just remember seeing people come running back down to their seats or to whatever seats they could get. Can you talk a little bit about that unpredictability when things like that would happen and what that meant on a security level?
Yeah, Jay, I don't know if it was that particular show, but I remember several that, normally Purple Rain, I feel like was the last song. There was a couple of encores. And it just depended on, the energy that he was receiving from the crowd and how he's feeling, uh, when the show would end. And I remember that, and this may have been Hartford. We got out to the vans and got them in, and you could still hear the crowd just roaring, man. It
Mm.
was just in the energy, and it's crazy because it seems like the longer that he wouldn't come back, the louder the crowd got and the more intense. And so, we were prepared to take off, and then I see the brake lights because we were in a van that was right behind his, and I see the brake
Mhm.
lights stop. I'm like, oh boy, this must mean we're going back in. And sure enough, he stops and he runs out of the van, and and then the thing too is like it was a surprise for us, but I'm like the crew, and you're always on edge because it's like, okay, is he done? Is he done? Is he done? And so, but you couldn't prepare for it, Jay. You never knew. You couldn't get in the say. I knew it was supposed to happen. I knew it was scripted, but Prince was so unpredictable.
Mm. It's amazing. Jay, do we have any photos or any memorabilia? Because Hucky had shared with us a ton of
Yeah,
photos.
yes,
I'm like,
but don't ruin the surprise.
Oh, there's a surprise?
There's a surprise when our viewers are looking at this recording. There's going to be a surprise,
Oh,
a
wow.
couple of surprises.
I
We're
love it.
just full of surprise. Well, Hucky, we have to welcome you to the fold in the proper fashion. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, come on, this is just and just in case anybody's playing at home, I'm drinking in a little bourbon in honor of Hucky being here, seeing as that's how we bonded.
That's right.
I'm having early times bottled in bond. I thought early times because we're talking about early times. There's a little intention behind my doing that. So
See, Kirk,
just
man,
wanted
you
to.
should have prepared me because now we gotta, and I'm still trying to get where my place is. I didn't want to bring out no bourbon, I was like, no, I won't do that for the first show. And then here you go. So now that I got the green light, there will be a glass of bourbon on the next show, probably for sure.
That's right. You can do your thing. So, Hucky, my question is, can you talk about your emotions? I mean, you're a young
Yeah.
man, and obviously I'm sure you're wide-eyed and just excited to be on the road. But there's probably a sense of relief when it comes to going home. What were your thoughts, if you can remember, after that last show, or as the last show was even coming to a close?
Yeah, like I said earlier, there was some uncertainty. I didn't know what to expect. And
It, it,
so,
it,
go ahead,
is
Chad.
there a sense of relief? I mean, are you relieved that, hey, this has been so massive, it's been so crazy, I'm going home?
I don't think so. I mean, it's like being an adrenaline junkie. It's just like, oh, I want more. I
Okay.
want more. Um, I mean, even today, I was just last year, I was talking to some friends, and I told them, I said, I would like to do one more tour,
Mhm.
one more.
Hmm.
It,
Yeah.
it's nothing like the rock and roll business, the excitement that you get from being on the road. Now, there's a lot of work, and in our day and age, especially in my role, safety and security is a real challenge. But
Mm.
just the energy that you get. I remember we played at Madison Square Garden. I think it was on the Hit and Run tour. I'm sure someone will correct me out there. I can't remember the exact dates or tours. But I was on stage, and I'm just focused to make sure no one gets on stage and tries to tackle Prince or anything like that. And for a minute, guys, I took a pause, and he was getting ready to play Kiss, and he started to riff, and the energy that flowed through the crowd. It's so hard to try to like tell you what that was like, but it was like electricity being poured through my whole body.
Mm.
And here I was just watching him. And so I could only imagine what that must have been like for him
Mm.
every night, and also for the band that received that kind of
Hmm.
boost. It was incredible. So for good or bad, the rock and roll business, it's something else.
Mm.
There's a price that's paid for excellence, because there's all this expectation, for an artist, if you've done this huge thing, that it's going to be that on that level every single time a person sees it. And, for those of us who have seen him live over the decades, it's he
So
always
let
gave
me
it.
ask you guys a question. Jay, how many times have you seen Prince?
35.
Jeez.
Was there any one show that was better than another from his performance?
For me, I'm going to say it was on the musicology tour. And I actually went 3 nights in a row. I sandwiched in the Hartford, Connecticut show in between two shows at Continental Airlines Arena in New Jersey. And this is July of 2004. And because we were part of the NPG Music Club, we just happened to be in the second row that night in Hartford. And not because it's my home state, but his performance that day, he did like a very, very poignant rendition of I Love You and Me, just him on the guitar. And then
Wow.
he tore the house down with Whole Lot of Love. And he was playing his guitar Sunny. And he was standing right in front of us, and he ripped off the solo. At the end, he put the guitar down, and the reverb was just going. And I remember looking around the arena and just seeing the impact that that song and that move had on the crowd. That's a standout for me, probably in all the times that I've seen Prince.
So here's my question. So you've seen him 3 nights on that tour, right in a row?
Right.
Was there any one show, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, was better, or were they all the same far as energy from him?
They were all different because of the energy. So that Hartford show, the one I was just talking about, was very very telling in the way that the energy kept up, but it was different every night. And it wasn't just the songs that he was playing. It was also just him being Prince.
What about for you, Kurt?
Okay. Jay, 35. I'm just thinking of that number of shows. I wish I'd seen that many. I saw 4 of them. And you asking what the most significant one is.
So
And
I
I
think that
there
you guys so let me give clarity. So let's
yeah.
just say this. Here's the clarity that I want to say. Imagine you were at the Forum in LA and he played 7 nights. Okay. Played seven
Yeah.
nights in a row at the Forum.
Yeah.
And so what I'm asking is that if you were there and you seen him 7 nights in a row at the Forum, do you think that the performances would have been any different at any one of those particular shows from his perspective, from the band? Does that make
Hmm.
sense? So
It,
here's
it,
where I'm going is that I've seen him over 700 times, and each tour was different, which is what I hear you saying, Jay, earlier. But the performance, the energy that he gave, I've never seen any. There was no lows. It was
Yeah.
consistent, all the same.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking, and I probably did a poor job of trying to,
Mm.
get that across.
No, not at all. I would say that it was a different energy. So I'll give a case in point. The third night of that musicology tour, Morris Day and the Time were there, and no one knew that they were going to be there. I happen to know because I saw JB, the Times protector, there first. And
Oh,
so
Hey, we got to
when the
give a
house lights,
shout out to him too, man.
we do. He was a wonderful, wonderful gentleman. God rest his soul. He
Yeah,
was nothing. He was nothing but nice to me, but he was always about his business.
yeah.
Um,
We'll have to talk
especially
about
that night.
him on one of our upcoming shows. He was a great guy. Anyway,
Sure,
sorry
sure,
to,
would love to.
to interrupt there.
Yeah, no
and
worries. And because the time was there, the crowd was off the chains when the clock
mm,
started ticking and the band hit the stage.
mhm.
And I don't know if that maybe motivated Prince a little bit, but that third show was still, there was no lull in the energy. It was just a different vibe.
Sure.
Yeah. So you asked about the different shows. I saw him 4 different times, and really each show had something really impactful in terms of energy. And every show I've seen him do, he brought his A game. That
Sure.
I will say. But I felt like they were really significant shows. Two out of the 4 really significant. So the first time I'd see him would be the Love Sexy tour, and that was amazing all on its own. No opening act, no, it just, and the spectacle and the technical effects, the visual effects, the sound. I mean, to this day, that show would hold up to anything I would see in current times. It was like a Broadway musical. with all these
And
different changes. It really had that what Broadway uses now. He was using several decades earlier. These complex productions. And then I wouldn't see him until 1998 for the Jam of the Year tour to promote emancipation, and he took a bass solo, and I can't say what the crowd would say. Hey, Prince, play that mother bleeping bass on a song called Face Down. For me, that was just like, oh man, okay. I see where he gets all his influences from just watching. That was really impactful.
Sure, sure.
Third show was actually a club show that Ashley Tamar Davis did with him when she was she was going to have a solo album come out, which never came out, Milk and Honey. And this was at the now it's the Washington National Stadium is built over this property, but it was the Club Nation in DC. It was this warehouse club, and it was the Late Show, and he was basically the backing guy for her. They were doing all kinds of in between her costume changes. He would be doing these deep cuts like Calhoun Square live. I was like, are you kidding me right now? He's playing this song live. I'm just like, okay. Party Man from the Batman soundtrack and in between costume changes. But then they would be doing cover songs of hers, and then like Janet Jackson's What Have You Done For Me Lately?
Sure.
Michael Jackson's Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. With him doing the keyboard solo, note for note on guitar. I distinctly remember that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This guy is insanely talented. And then the last show is the most significant one for a variety of reasons. And that was the Freddie Gray tribute benefit concert. And that was on Mother's Day 2015, 10 years ago, almost 10 years. This week, the 10th, a month ago, will be 10 years.
Sure.
And that was significant for a number of reasons. The system is broken. It's going to take the young people to fix it. I distinctly remember him saying that in the middle of his solo Purple Rain. He took a moment to speak to the audience, and just every show, I can't say which one's better than the other because he always brought his A game, Hucky. He always brought his A game.
well, that's my
And
point.
you know,
Um, yeah, and from all the shows that I've seen, you would just figure once in a while somebody would be off. And maybe the band members would tell you something different, but I don't recall.
And Hucky, there obviously Prince loved his fans. He honored his fans. I remember him saying that, he never talked down to his audience. Can you give your thoughts and your reflections on the relationship Prince had with his fans and they had with him?
Yeah, I can tell you something that just came to my mind as soon as you said that. I feel like maybe it was Love Sexy and we were playing in Chicago. And, the job can be demanding. Sometimes you can be irritable. And, you always need, and over the years, this is something I've certainly learned, to be as kind as possible to people. But sometimes that's easier said than done. And I remember snapping on, we were going to the vehicle, and somebody was trying to hop over the rail or something. And, we were telling him, I was looking up at him, get back up there. And he was trying to jump down. And I probably said something that wasn't appropriate or mean. And he waited till we got to the van, and he told me, he says, don't you ever, ever yell at my fans like that again. He's like, I understand why you were upset. He says, but that's not what we do, Hucky. And it's like, I got it. And so that just shows you, even though this fan was, and who knows what he, may have tried to end up doing.
Sure.
But, Prince, he thought a lot of his fans. And I know that that's kind of hard to believe sometimes when you remember all the issues that would happen if people would download YouTube stuff and, the web sheriff, we all remember that. But he had a way that he felt about his music and his personal image. And it took me a while to appreciate that. It's like he had every right, regardless of how we may feel about it. But, I've said this over and over again. You know, Prince was married to his music, and his music meant everything to him. And that's certainly something we'll probably talk about in another show. You know, we'll
Mm.
talk about, you know, about him not having a will. And I have a thought that I want to share with everyone from personal experience. So that's a surprise, Jay, coming up.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Here's a teaser, right?
Love it.
Is there, Hucky, a moment from the Purple Rain tour that stands out for you?
Man, Jay, that's a tough question. There were so many. There were just so many moments. I'm gonna go back to the beginning at the
Mm.
Joe Louis Arena, man.
Mhm.
Once again, we can remember, guys, this is my very first tour. And once again, you know, you talk about that electricity, that vibe that filled the arena. It's something that I wish that everyone could experience. It's an incredible feeling. And so I'll reference Dwayne's book, and I had a conversation with Dwayne not too long ago, and I thanked him. I thanked him for his research because
Mm.
you know my memory, and not just mine, but a lot of us that are my age now, sometimes it kind of fades. And so Dwayne's books have really been able to help me to reminisce and bring things back to the forefront. But he
Mm.
talks about being at the Joe Louis Arena, and when I was reading that, you guys, I relived it. And so, you know, there was a lot of moments, man, a lot of fun times, a lot of things that we did together. You know, but that Joe Louis, the first shows were probably, you know, a moment that it was really special because it was my first time doing that. It was my first
Mm.
time seeing him play in front of a large, you know, audience like that.
Special.
Hockey, you know what? And JD and Hockey, I feel like at some point, 1985 is a very pivotal year. At some point, maybe we should have a separate episode talking about the We Are the World American Music Awards
Oh, yeah.
uh, era and time, because that's a whole interesting
We should.
dynamic. I mean, I know there's a whole documentary on that night, and the huge narrative
Yeah,
with
because I
Sheila.
would love to try to get the record straight from my perspective. I talked to a
Yes.
friend a couple days ago, and they were saying either they seen it on YouTube, you know, or somewhere on the internet. And we know it has to be true because it was on the internet, right?
Right.
Um, but you know, if the White Prince didn't perform and somebody had said something, I said that's not accurate. So
Mhm.
I feel like I'm blessed to have been able to see and be around him. And so what I do, the people that are willing to hear what Hucky has to say, I share my 2 cents on what was accurate and what's not, you know. But even with that, you know, there's people that, you know, have their own thoughts and their own beliefs, and
Mhm.
they're gonna go ahead and do and say what they believe. But at least I can
But you were
share.
there, Hockey.
But you
Yeah,
know
you were
what, though,
there.
Kurt, sometimes that doesn't matter. Somebody on one of these Prince fan groups, I had wrote something that's, oh, that's not true, that's not true. And a couple people's like, do you know who you're talking to? This guy was there. He's, I don't care, I don't believe it. So you're entitled to that. That's fine. I know what the truth is.
Hockey, we're just incredibly happy. And sorry, Jay. I just have to say again that you're part of the team now. This is like, we're going to eventually talk to non-Prince associates and
Man, we
people,
got so much
out.
stuff we're gonna talk about. I can't wait.
Man,
We
Okay,
got
so
so many
actually,
great
that
guests.
that was going to be my question. I was going to say, Hucky, can you let everyone out there know a little bit what we can expect now that we're this trio, this dynamic trio?
So, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge and respect all the work that you guys have already done. You guys are the main reason why I decided to, you know, join something that you guys already had in place. It's because I
mm,
appreciated what you had did, and I was like, you know, this is something that I would like to be a part of. But I know that most people think that this is going to be a show that's just Prince focused, and That's not entirely true. We'll talk a lot about Prince, but there's a lot of other things that are happening in the world today. With other different musicians. I have a security background, so I want to share some thoughts with that. But the main reason why I wanted to do this is that I'm concerned about Prince's legacy.
Mm.
I'm concerned about what the next generation will think of him. And I just wanted to do my part to make sure that, in my mind, that people remember the GOAT. He's the GOAT as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Right.
Yep.
And so, Hucky, let me just piggyback on that. Can you just expound on what Prince meant to you?
Yeah, I mean, man, that's a complicated question,
Mhm.
Jay, and here's why. It's just so much that I have gotten from him over the years. I have a really good work ethic, and I attributed that to two individuals, my father and Prince. Um, I did 5 tours, I believe. Yeah, I think 5. We'll go with that. Somebody might call me up, but I think I can prove I was on 5. Um, I know he was sick. I know he was tired, and he never ever missed a show. I even think about the last show that he did, and we now know that he wasn't healthy, and he went out there and gave his all. And so when you're around someone like that that has such a high expectation on excellence, it has to rub off on you, you know. And certainly in Prince's his camp, if it didn't rub off on you, you weren't going to be around.
Mm.
So my work ethic, I owe a lot to him. I owe a lot to him on helping me be able to push through comfort levels to where I didn't think I could do or be better. He challenged not only me, but everybody who worked with him to be better, to do better.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of stuff that we can say. I mean, Prince was a human being, and so, he had his negatives and he had his positive, but for the most part, man, he helped most of us grow.
Kurt.
Sir, going forward, what can we look forward to on our next episode?
Is that a Hucky question, or is that a Jay question about who our next?
I don't know. Jay, whoever wants to take the
Well,
question.
I was going to throw it out there to Hucky, new member of the team. I'll let him go.
Can we say like some doctor scrubs in the house, maybe a mask, maybe a connection with somebody from the revolution?
Wait a minute. The who? These guys?
Oh wow, look at that shirt.
Yep. So, since our episode today has focused on the past, we're going to have a special guest who has a connection to the past, but is actually the future of the Minneapolis Sound and beyond. And that is Matt Fink's son, or excuse me, Matt Fink's son, Max Fink. He goes by MVXMILLI, and
Say that
that
5 times
stands for
real
Maxim.
fast.
Yeah, and it goes by Maximili. He's a budding young artist in his own right, and is a frequent collaborator with others, and including a gentleman named Darko, whose personas also is in the other world that he lives in is a hit songwriter. So we're going to look forward to talking to Max. In fact, we're going to record that episode tomorrow,
Mhm.
and
And
he
Kurt, if I can just say, this young
please.
man is dynamic. I mean, his skills, his beats, his overall musicality is a little bit retro, but very, very fresh. Harkens back to the '80s. But
Yes,
if you don't know, you better ask somebody. And it's going to be our pleasure to help promote this young man.
can't wait. So we normally close now that there are 3 of us. Um, this is different. So we're starting to get used to how this is going to work as the 3 Musketeers, and I'm just again I gotta say I'm thrilled beyond belief that we can reminisce and talk about a show that you were actually an integral part of, Hucky, and how 40 years ago
All right,
at
but we don't have
this
to keep saying 40, 40, 40.
40.
Wow.
Okay, sorry.
How about we
We'll
just
just
we'll just say many years ago.
A long time ago in a faraway galaxy.
Yeah, way
right.
back
Purple
And
Yoda.
then.
and going forward, we're going to talk about how I'm sure we're going to keep talking about how excited, Hucky, you are. We are to have you joining us. This is really a breath of fresh air for us. We're extremely grateful to you for your friendship to both of us, your friendship to the
Yes.
show on your previous visits, and we are just thrilled with what we're going to be able to do as a trio going forward. So that's a thanks to you as well for
Yes.
joining us and for really sharing your stories and your time. And it's going to be just, I think, wonderful for everyone else out there going forward.
For
And
sure.
I always say, Jay, before we exit off, again, thank you, Hucky, and this journey going forward. Folks, it's just going to get exponentially better and better with each episode. We're
And if
using
you like
new
what you saw,
podcasting software. Yeah. Oh, if you like what you saw and you heard, thank you, Jay. We are on all the streaming platforms one could possibly want to be on: Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you get your Podbean,
YouTube.
wherever you get this. YouTube, which was where we started this whole thing. You can find us on a number of different platforms. And if you're on those platforms, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the add buttons so that you'll get upcoming content. We plan on doing this about once a week. There may be some exceptions to the rule. And once again, thanks to our new co host, Hucky Austin, I'd like to say thank you very much for tuning in. And before we close out, a rising tide lifts all boats. Jay.
And for me, I'm going to say, Hucky, thanks again. We can't say it enough how thrilled we are. And if anyone's tired of us saying that, that's just too bad. And I want to thank everybody out there for the support. The response to Hucky joining us has been overwhelming and humbling. And we're grateful for everyone that took the time to comment and post. And before I turn it over to Hucky to close us out, I'm going to say that remember, when the universe comes knocking, you have to answer that door. Hucky?
Well, I just want to say I am so excited. I'm super happy to be here. And I can't, I can only imagine the possibilities that we're going to be able to do here. And so we're looking to do good.
Mm.
But I wanted to say, we live in a very chaotic world. And I just want to tell people, be kind to one another. Do your best to have some love. Be open-minded. Don't have tunnel vision.
Thank you all, and we'll see you again soon. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.